It's been too long since I've had you on the show, and I've been wanting to follow up with a conversation. Nathan Spearing, a man with a checkered past, just kidding.
Okay.
And yet you've moved from what many would consider the dream job of the tactical world to blue collar blue collar life. And so Nathan, you're somebody that I do consider a mentor from time to time. You're somebody that I look up to, and I get to say, there's some stories about it, but I need you to introduce yourself one more time.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what episode are you on now? I think it
We're
was
at
in the
we're
single
we're
digits last time.
yep, and we're now in the 200s.
Dang. You passed me up big time. Uh Nathan Spearing, born and raised in northern Alabama, oldest of 7 kids. And I guess this will tie into the blue collar side, but when I was 13 years old, we bought a 3-bedroom house. My father and I added on a 1,700 square foot addition to make room for the big family. So that's kind of where I got my blue collar education that lasted from age 13 to when I joined the military and shipped at age 19, I believe I was when I shipped. After working a congressional campaign for one cycle and then shipped for infantry basic training and Ranger indoctrination program, as it was called. We get to say back when it was hard, you know. Uh,
Oh, I went to RIP.
yep.
I was having a conversation with a fellow the other day, and he was like, "Oh no, you definitely went to RASP. Like, you don't mix those things up."
No.
But that's a if you know you know kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And so I did 12. I guess making that whole thing. We can dive into as much as you want there too, but making that it's did almost 14 years. I think 13 years, 9 months, and 12 rotations, 375, 175, uh, Fort Bragg, and then basically my 12th trip. Pretty sure it was my 12th trip. Yeah, I didn't do another one after that. So my 12th trip, I was working out of an embassy, watching my kids open Christmas presents on video, and feeling micromanaged by my own chain of command, not the other 3-letter agencies that we always like to hate. And so I was like, well, you're going to send me over here and I'm going to watch Christmas happen on video and I'm going to get micromanaged. I think I could figure something else out. So that was at about the 12-year mark. I have 5 children. They were the oldest was 7 at the time that I put the mark on the wall and basically had 7 years left before I could have gotten that coveted government pension. And a lot of my peers' heads exploded because it kind of was the normal thing that once you got to where I got, you were going to stay in forever. You're going to do probably 25 years because coincidentally your E9 works out where you got to give a couple extra. I think I probably would have still got I got E8 in 12 years. So I probably could have got my E9 and retired with my high 3 before 20, but maybe would have had to do 21 to keep the sergeant major pay. And so, yeah, peers and support people that I was clearing, turning all my stuff in, are like, you know, only have to do 7 more years. And my line was, say that again out loud. Who says only 7 years when that is not in the government socialist system? And so got out. That was December 2016. A lot of people made fun of me for getting out right for the glory years. I literally was up in my VA appointments in Boston when the election happened, and everybody was laughing at me like, "Oh, we're about to have some glorious years with the new chain of command," and I was like, it's cyclical, and I knew it. Got out in 2016, started a construction business. We had just closed on a 8,300 square foot mansion. I had found out right after I put $110,000 down on that I was going to owe my Charlie Zone bonus, I think it was, back, the prorated portion of that. So that came to just short of $40,000 or right at $40,000. And so I wrote that $40,000 check. So I had lost basically in a 24, 48-hour period was 150K lighter on my savings. So I had a little less margin at that point. So I started a general contracting company 2 or 3 days later. So it's like the 1st of December was my last day. The 28th, 29th, November, I closed on the mansion. And then the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th, something like that, of December is when I formed the LLC for the construction business. Cause I didn't have, I kind of, the way I was approaching getting out is like, I got 80 or so K in the bank. I got this rental property that's paying for itself because we were in a duplex at the time. I'm making, you know, 25, 30 grand a year from that rental. It's paying everything. I got money in the bank. I got a good year's salary. I'm going to figure this out as I take kind of a year off in a sense. I have this mansion. I'm going to be working on it, but I'll have some time. And then half my margin got cut the last day. And so then I spent another half of it, another 20 grand or so, getting the truck, getting some tools that I lacked, and started the business. So went from about 250K to 20, 30K in the bank in a month, and started the business. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Now, I'm very excited to announce the first official sponsor of the Redacted Culture Cast. Obsidian Arms is one of those companies that reflects the many facets of gun culture. Not only are their firearms frequently found on competition fields like USPSA and 3Gun, but they are a Minnesota-based, U.S.-sourced original equipment manufacturer. Obsidian Arms makes their own punch and tool kits for the amateur and professional gunsmith out of Little Canada, Minnesota, that come with a lifetime warranty. Whether it is fine parts that require a Swiss machine, or you're in the design phase and are looking for an American machine shop that is in tune with the needs of gun culture, go check out Obsidian Arms at obsidianarms.com. Thank you, and now back to the show.
So we're
With a wife,
almost
with a wife and 5 kids. That's
wife and 5 kids. And so, yeah, we moved into the mansion 4 months later without central HVAC or heat. I got some fireplaces working, so we moved in. First summer was kind of moving. We got a little portable AC unit, so we're kind of like moving that around wherever we were hanging out. We had a window unit in the bedrooms we were sleeping in, but we kind of suffered through the first summer. And then the next winter, we were able to get natural gas hooked up, so we had some ventless fireplaces that we could turn on and kind of have instant heat pouring into the rooms. So we all had 8,300 square feet, but we ended up the whole family sleeping in about 600 square foot end of the house that we would shut off and run a fireplace overnight. So everybody's kind of warm. And started, set up tools in the Monday through Friday, took them down, worked in the evenings, worked on the weekends, getting the mansion together. 2020, we turned that into a short-term rental, just kind of divine that right as we were finishing this property, everybody didn't want to stay in hotels. That was the kind of the glory years of the short-term rental business, and happened kind of right as we finished. So we did from kind of end of July to end of that year in 2020, we did 50, 60 grand gross revenue out of that property. And I have a couple social media posts. Like, that was a time for me reflecting back on that and seeing, and I've contrasted what that first weekend that I got in July 2020, which was not quite 4 years after getting out. It's like three and some change after getting out, and was basically saying I'm earning whatever percentage over my DoD retirement check in one weekend 3.5 years after getting out. So that's kind of one of the, obviously a not an easy 3 years as a family to get to that point, but still the reality of, and that's basically kind of what I was betting on when I got out, was that I could turn that time into something. And then even the other side of it is having real estate, having businesses that generate money. Those survive you leaving. you dying. A government pension ends when you die, with some couple exceptions, but um, can't pass it to my kids. So that was kind of the initial thing that pushed me to get out, was time with the kids. But then as I didn't have this, all right, we're going to start this business, we're going to scale, we're going to get the homestead, we're going to get real estate, we're going to do this, and this. I didn't have really any of that together. That just kind of started to fall into place. But then my mindset, and then looking back and saying, okay, the reality is I'm building something, even with the homestead, having the land, living in a bus right now. I guess that's the other side of it. Is as soon as we got the mansion renting, we had the duplex still. So we at one time had 3 Airbnbs going, and we did a month to month rental, and finished our bus and closed on 20 acres. So for a 4-month period, we had 3 Airbnbs going. We had 20 acres of land, and I was busting to get the bus finished. Actually, we moved into one side of the duplex again, so we downsized back to the duplex, but listed it on Airbnb for March, I think, of 21, and had it booked out immediately, booked up several months. So it's basically like, we will be in the bus, March of 2021. We will be living there. That was March of 22, because March 25 will be 3 years. So yeah, we basically had this ticking clock. We've always I work good under deadlines. So we moved. We had no power on the land. We had no water on the land. We had the trusses set for our pole barn that we're going to park the bus in. I had the slab poured on part of the barn pad for the 40 feet of it that the bus was going to be parked on. And we pulled the bus out there, and essentially, thankfully, the septic was in, so I wasn't going to have to cart sewage back and forth to town. I never had to do that adventure, but I was carting water from our rental property out there, because we didn't have the well out there yet. We didn't have power. So we basically cobbled together a Harbor Freight solar panels, some car batteries, some on-demand marine 12-volt pumps, some tanks, water tanks, and different things like that. And had about, I think we got power a couple months after being out there, which changed everything. So I had a temporary panel, a couple plugs that we could, it's kind of right as it was getting hotter. So we were able to get the AC kicked on in the bus, and got the well a couple months later. So I was carting those IBC totes. I would park it at my rental. I figured out how much time it take to fill the tank, go to work, come back, tank would be full, drive it home, gravity feed it to the next to the bus, and just kept doing it. Kept running the construction business, kept managing the Airbnbs, and yeah. So fast forward, we have a framed house. HVAC's going in Monday, electrical's going in Wednesday. We have power on the house, which is nice. Roofing felt on it, so it's dried in. We're trying to get insulation in, drywall in, and potentially move in to it partially built, and get out of the bus before the 3-year mark. Shooting for before Christmas. But there'll be some lack of infrastructure still, but we're used to living in remodels. That's the thing. So
the way you tell your story, your kids have got to be some pretty hard, pretty strong, adventurous.
yeah, they're beasts. I mean, I think that I miss out on, because when you're living it, and that's just kind of been the way, even for me. Like, we was 12 combat deployments, living out of a chew overseas, sleeping on the ground. I was used to kind of that rhythm, and that transientness, and that ruggedness of things. But the fact that my wife and my kids are going along with a similar kind of thing is epic. And then we were actually at the polls yesterday voting early, and had my 12-year-old with me, and a brick mason, comes up behind us. And I was like, well, I'm going to be in line for an hour. Might as well make some friends. So I was talking to him, and realizing as I'm talking about what we're doing, and then even just the facial expressions that my son is making as I'm talking about it. And then these, new friends are watching his face and they're like, you can tell that guy knows a lot, and you can tell that kid has lived, and the way that he just kind of was reacting uh, to the story and smiling, knowingly smiling about some of the stuff, and it's awesome. And the other side of it too is we're homeschooling, and they're going and doing my in-laws live here now, so my mother-in-law's teaching a creative writing class, and they do some debate and some presentations with some of the other homeschool kids. They're going to piano lessons and violin lessons and cello lessons and things like that. So in addition to homesteading, building the house with our own hands together, my wife's also cultivating a fine understanding and taste for classical music and old books. If I walk around at bedtime to pray for everybody, everybody's got a headlamp or a little light kind of mounted in their little bunk area in the bus, and they're in a book and they're reading, and I'm like, hey, time to go to sleep. Or sometimes, depending on what we got the next day, I'll go to sleep, and there'll be 5 kids and reading in books. If I wake up in the middle of the night to go check on something or whatever, there'll be 1 or 2 bunk lights still on and a kid passed out, drooling in a book or whatever. So I kind of feel like that, again, not a master plan, that I talked about, right when we were getting married. All right, this is how many kids we're going to have. This is how we're going to educate them. This is how whatever. But just how my wife's unique contributions and the fact that we're doing stuff that's rugged and blue collar and Renaissance type skills, but they're also just crushing their homeschool curriculum is predominantly reading and writing, from old books, dead authors, and so just even that, and being like, all right, I need somebody to come help me do something on the house. Oh, they can't. They got violin. Oh shoot, it's Thursday. Forgot. They're gone. And then picking them up from having the boys go early so they can knock out their lessons, picking them up at 5:20 and beat and feed over to church fight club at one of the local churches where a retired Green Beret that was at the combative school is teaching 15, 20 boys, no gi jujitsu. And we start out with a, 30-minute devotion and prayer time, so my sons are going right from violin into, um, church fight club. And then, we're coming back and playing around with night vision thermals on the farm, and then they're jumping in the books, and then we do it again, so even though kind of we've been in the bus longer than we wanted to be in, even though, um, there's been twists and turns to the story, uh, the multi-generational aspect, the being around my children, to being a influence in their life that is generally a positive one, and then even just the opportunity to confess when I am impatient with them or lose my cool, because it's there's an 8-year-old out there hauling lumber and putting it in the dumpster. He has a different capacity than the 12-year-old, the 15-year-old, and kind of adjusting my expectations for them is epic. I mean, we're just and ultimately, I've been telling the kind of my mantra to my wife and to my kids and to anybody that asks about it is 3 years in a bus is going to seem like nothing when 3 generations have been coming to the farm and enjoying what we kind of in a lot of ways over leveraged ourselves financially and like attention and resource and bandwidth wise too. Like it feels pretty insane right now, building a house, running a business, multiple businesses in a sense. And even right now, spending some time to cultivate the media arm of what we're doing and wanting to inspire other people, just like we were talking about pre-show, your buddy that's thinking about jumping from the government job to the blue collar world. I say it at the beginning of that handout we were talking about is, it will be harder than you expect, but it will be more rewarding than you can imagine. And so I think that's kind of one of those universal principles of the way the God wired the universe. It's going to be harder than you expect, but you put forth the effort, just like weightlifting. You break that muscle tissue down, you exert yourself, and you get in shape, you get stronger. Same happens with business and spiritual life and relationships and building a house, so.
Well, Nathan, you present a conundrum here because on one half of the coin, one horn of the dilemma is to address your military history, what things that you accomplished, and then where that came from. So, for example, like, what was it about your childhood or your mindset that helped you go through all of the phases for you to get to where you got? But then after that, it's all, well, then what took place, or like, let's say, let's even rephrase it another way. If you could go back and look at who you were before you were in the military, in through your pathway there, what are key lessons and takeaways, as well as things that you saw contribute to your successes?
Yeah,
Then go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that going pre-military for sure, probably three things that contributed to where I'm at. One is being homeschooled all the way through myself. So very early in life, I actually have my son's editing a podcast on this, the difference between education and school. That I got an education, I didn't go to school. And I think that is one of the most important things that you can do for a kid, is teach them how to learn and give them an education. And the education is more than the subjects that the government says are considered the important things. And so, my family's homeschool methodology is definitely different than our family, that were like my mom and dad, but they were first generation homeschoolers. So in a lot of times they were doing it reactionary way. Like, I don't want to put my kids in public school. But in a lot of ways, what we emulated a lot of the same things that were happening. It was just with wholesome teachers. It was other moms teaching science. And so we would do a lot of the same subjects. But with our particular family, I think we were able to move beyond that and say, I literally do not care about what the government says you should be learning. And we are required in North Carolina to have a school and declare that we're going to homeschool. And then we have to do standardized testing and keep attendance records. So bare minimum kind of thing. And I was even kind of pushing against that. Like, that's stupid. Like, I don't have to ask the government to school my children, and I don't have to do their stupid standardized testing. But my wife's like, hey, let's go ahead and do it. The kids are probably like, and the kids are like amped this year to sit down and do standardized testing. And even just to see from age 8 to age 15, the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old, their spelling kind of and grammar comprehension isn't that great because they haven't read the volume of books. But then to look at our 14 to 15-year-old, and they're scoring, literally not even doing a whole lot of formal grammar and stuff, just reading and understanding that. So, but the reality was, my parents gave me, I just talked about this recently, to time, not to standard. The military is always, you're going to clean your weapons until X time, and you're not going to get let go. We got a final formation at the end of the day, so nobody can leave, kind of thing. I didn't have any of that growing up. I knew what I had to do for the majority of my schooling to be done. And a lot of days I would get up on early at 5 a.m. on Wednesday, do my math for the rest of the week, and then ask my mom if she'd drive me up to Micah's house to play. And so that ability to have autonomy over my time and to have a kind of a standard list of tasks that needed to get accomplished. But then if I did it, I mean, I had the answer keys, the solutions manual, and the lesson plan for my math book. And my dad would have me, I had to take the test, grade the test, rework my work beside the work in red, circle where I made my mistake, calculate my own grade, photocopy the test sheet, staple it to the front of the thing, and put it in a folder in my dad's office at work. I mean, at the house. So I literally, but I never went to the solution manual and got 100% myself. And I looking back on that, I don't know why, but I think I knew, like, the point is that I take the test and be able to do this without looking. And so I literally have given myself C's when I had the answer book like sitting on the table next to me. And then if my dad ever went into the folder, which he didn't go in very often, there's times I kind of was like, oh man, he hasn't checked the folder in a while. I don't really have to do my test this week. Life was over if he went in to the folder and he it had been 5 weeks or whatever since he checked, and there was only 2 tests in there, and I was there were life ended until I was caught up with math, and even then to get caught up, I was not cheating. Like, okay, I'll just pen it, work because the solution manual literally has the problem worked out, so I could literally just copy it and put it in the folder to get off of restriction. I didn't do it. So integrity, putting forth the work, not trying to hack my way or cheat my way through it, and then building on our house starting at 13. Like always, my dad's a mechanical engineer, so that was pre YouTube. Watching my dad figure out how to put 1,700 square foot addition onto the house, talk to general contractors, going to the plumbing supply store, all those kinds of things, and working through and seeing my dad solve problems and figure things out and cultivate relationships. And then I swam competitively in the city league from age 5 until I got my license at 16. And then I started club swimming, which was, I think, 10 or 11 practices a week. 5 mornings a week. The weekday morning starting at 5 a.m., going till 7, and then again in the evening. So driving myself to that, and then my dad, if I back to that missing my test in the folder and getting on restriction, he'd take my car away from me, and I'd say, well, am I allowed to use a bike? So I would bike to the pool, which was like 6 miles. It didn't happen a lot of times, but basically I didn't want to miss practice. So I would bike. I couldn't set my alarm at 4:30 and get to the pool by 5. I'd have to get up earlier. I don't think I did that very many times, but I do remember doing it a couple times while I was because my car was, even though I bought the car, myself and paid for everything because I was working, my dad would still take the car from me because I wasn't being a steward of what I was supposed to do, and then even figuring out a way. Okay, well, I'm allowed to use a bike and do it. So that, I think, probably even haven't even really even described probably that part of my story, but essentially, I had a mental toughness and a grit and integrity and a work ethic that was exceptional before I left the house. So, I just showed this story on another podcast a couple weeks ago. But when I got to basic training with the Ranger contract, they only 2 of you guys are going to make it in the Ranger platoon. There's 50 of us, and I wasn't being arrogant. I was just like, who's the other guy? Like, I know one of the 2 is me, and one of the other guys, I wonder which one of the guys here and towing the line in the barracks is the guy that's going to make it the whole way with me. I think about 8 of us or 9 of us ended up making it through everything from that platoon. Um, but yeah, so early on, it's formative, and that's essentially what I'm trying to kind of cultivate with my children now. And even, my brother and I talk about it because my dad was very a hard man to work for, and to be your authority figure, but also, like, God didn't mess up and give me the wrong dad. I wasn't meant to have I was meant to have the dad I had. And there's good and bad with that, just like there's good and bad with military service. And looking back, I am who I am right now because of the sum of the good and the bad, and accepting that reality, having the faith. And we were texting about friends that we lost in overseas, like the reality to accept that there's a divine author that writes the story a way that is ultimately good, but doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you right now in the moment, and accepting that. And so I am really able to look back on my entire life. And it ultimately is a great life. If I was going to complain about childhood, I realized getting to the military and having a mom and dad that were still married together and loved each other, and the amount of people in my basic training platoon or my teammates or whatever that had a 2-parent home, is I would say single digit percentage of my peers 2-parent homes still. So just that, the reality that growing up in a home with where mom and dad are there, they love each other. They had the guts to pull us out of school and give us a education. Um, and I had won the lottery, the family lottery, the geographic lottery of where I grew up, the hometown, all that, and that 100% equipped me to go into the military. Now, going into the military, I think we talked about this. Getting to Ranger Battalion and saying I am a homeschool Christian who's a virgin and who doesn't drink and cuss. I don't cuss. I don't drink. Uh, that was kind of my intro because but might as well cut it off at the pass. And then also I wanted that accountability to come from other image bearers that maybe weren't professing Christ as Lord, but in it have a soul, whether it's shrouded in a bunch of nasty behaviors and opinions and language and the way they treat other people, but they know the truth. The truth is evident in the world around us, and so they knew. Like if I did something that was not Christian, they'd be like, "I thought you were a Christian, dude," And these guys that those are some of the lowest times in my life is when a filthy mouthed Ranger Bat peer says that to me, but how glorious it is too. And what an opportunity to confess, to be like, you're right. I shouldn't be getting this bent out of shape about this or whatever. So yeah, it's everything in life. I can just, it's as hard as the things, probably the hardest things in life happened in the military. And to arrive at age 19, infantry basic training, and not even really know how weird I was until I was there in the barracks talking to, at MEPS. That's when it started. Like, what, dude? Like, you're a virgin at what? Like, and then just like 15, 20 people gathered around because I was a freak show in a sense. Like what about, all the hypotheticals, all the, like, they've just never met anybody that had the background or the convictions that I did, and just continually having the opportunity to give an answer for the hope that was in me, and not always doing it well, I'm sure, but yeah, it's literally just epic. I think it's really, I've been contemplating how to tell the story well and how to ultimately give glory to God for the story that he wrote specifically in my life. But, I've had an epic life so far, and
Well,
I'm super excited about what's to come. It's not even like I'm having to live in the past and always talk about these times in the military and the glory days. Like I'm building stuff right now with my children, and I'm training them on all these military things too, because I don't want my kids to go into the military right now, but I have the skills and I have the background, and I can be teaching him about this. And we got a range on the property, and we're, building wealth so that I can afford ammo and afford all these things and build it out. And it's epic. Like I'm so stoked about life right now.
So you're gonna, if you encounter somebody who's gonna be, let's just say they're in their 20s, later 20s though, they've been out for a while. One thing about, like, I can relate to elements of your story because I was homeschooled and I had some similar experiences, but there's this I'm worried about a sense of fatalism that you get in some people, not some people, in many of our peers, people who've come from similar units, or people who are peers without the shared military experience, who they might hear your story and say, "Oh, well, I have none of those. My parents aren't together. I wasn't homeschooled. I wasn't developed in education. I don't have whatever, these kind of things." the only reason why I'm saying this, and well, not the only reason, but the question is couched in this. Some people will hear your story and say, "Hell yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna put my axe to the grindstone. I'm gonna build my family. I'm gonna take care of what I have." And then other people are gonna go, "Oh well, that's not even possible for me." Not necessarily your story even alone, but just like the elements of it, the character development as a child. Well, I'm not a child anymore, one might say, or the um the challenges in the military with you have to stand on your integrity, and someone might look back and say, well, when I was in the military I didn't have that experience, I was much more of the prodigal.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might come even further to, well, you had all of this training and development and character development so that when you left the military and you told your family, eventually told your family we're going to live in a bus for 3 years, that they could trust you to provide for them. And not everybody, many people might say that's great for him, but I don't have that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have that now. What how would you approach that problem? Because again, I'm thinking about this in sort of the fatalistic way of, well, that all worked out really well for you, but I can't go back and change my childhood. I can't go back and erase, whether it's traumatic experiences or whether it's rearrange my deployment so that I've got good ones and a good legacy, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach this problem, both as a man and more importantly as a Christian?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, uh, how long do you get to blame your parents? You know, uh, I think that I can look at some of my own siblings' lives, and they're viewing my father through a different optic than they should be. And that has stunted their ability to get to where God wants them to be. And so I guess that would be that you can choose to, back to kind of what I said earlier, you are who you are right now because of the sum of the good and the bad. And in a lot of ways, the bad more so than the good. The bad is forming uh, in a much more acute way than the good things. So, and then you're responsible to the creator. I'm sorry. For some reason, you're listening to me talk right now. And the fact that you're hearing these words from me, you are responsible to the creator of the universe for your actions right now. And 100% you will have to give an account for those actions. Now, the other side of the gospel, the thing that makes Christianity unique from all the other flavors that copy aspects of it, but that are a cheap counterfeit, is Jesus Christ, fully God, fully man, paid the price. And so you don't get to say I messed up too bad for Jesus's blood to cover what I did. You just don't get to say that. And so, sorry, I just made you accountable and responsible for that reality now for the rest of your life because you just heard me say it. So, the sooner that you get with the program on that, the sooner that you don't fight that, the sooner that you realize that there is the Word of God, that is literally a cheat manual for how life works. That there's all these stories about how uh, even godly men like King David, who screwed things up and committed an affair with his. I mean, those of us that lived in the military community know that special operations guys are notoriously bad at keeping their sex drive in control, and they like to flaunt themselves as super strong masculine men, but they can't control their penis. Like, so how disciplined and controlled are you really when you have basic carnal things that you can't master, and that you're just running away with it? And so, but we see that literally King David is being a perv on the roof and sees this woman and gets her pregnant and then sends one of his best warriors to get killed. I mean, there's accounts like that, but yet the Son of God came from that child. Like, the thing that blows my mind, and that's the things I feel like pastors don't really want to wade into these crazy hairy waters. But it's like literally the prophecies of Christ's birth require David to be that way, that in a sense. And how do we deal with this uh free will, predestination of God's order and all these kinds of things? We just uh, when you read the testimony of Scripture, it's full of terrible, nasty guys that did just sick and heinous things, but God is there and God is working through that. And so that's, I guess I would say, is like this. And then the other side is, we know from land nav, any of you that have done land navigation, if you don't do your declination, your grid to magnetic calculation, specifically not maybe at Fort Benning because it's almost nothing there, but in certain parts of the world, you get a 6, 7, 8 degree declination from grid to magnetic, you're lost in the sauce. So that capacity for you right now to get a bearing that is true north, that is correct, may not feel like you've made much of a correction right now, but over time and generationally is going to have exponential impact. So literally just the ability for you to say, I'm going to make a 1 degree course correction right now in how I am towards my wife, or a 1 degree course correction in how I am single, I don't have a wife, 1 degree course correction in how I allocate my time that is not engaged in making money or growing myself personally to cultivate spiritual discipline, spiritual knowledge. I'll make a 1 degree correction to increase my capacity to lift, to reduce my body mass index, like all these different ways. Ultimately we see in Scripture the spiritual, the physical, and the body, mind, soul, and spirit. So are you able to cultivate your mental aspect, the spiritual aspect, regulate your emotions, and then the way the American church has lost a lot of these men, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm doing social media and stuff, is talking about, like, there's a different story than mainstream quasi homosexual obese pastors are telling us about, that aren't even, that are afraid of their wives, in a sense. Like, they're literally sitting down and writing these sermons and being like, okay, there's 3 or 4 particular women in my congregation that I do not want to upset. And so they're running it through the filter of these 3 or 4 women that are literally not are out of control, and anyway, like that's delving into that. I would say there are churches, even for me as a guy, like, that has been at the tip of the spear. I get a benefit from submitting to men that are 1%, or single digit percentage, as deadly as I am or whatever, but have spiritual discipline far surpassing anything that I will cultivate, are better fathers. And so I'm finding I guess I say is the word of God preached unapologetically? Are the families in worship together, and are men leading? And also, like, look through the fog a little bit, make sure that there's not men up front, but that there's a shadow matriarchy pulling all the strings. So there are churches like that everywhere, and you'll know it. The men will generally tend toward the more in shape aspect, because the way you look, and this will trigger some people, the way you look on the exterior is a reflection of what your mind is like. Physiological aspects, the being in shape, the blood flow that comes from cardio and lifting, the muscle tissue that's cultivating your mind. So got somebody that's in shape. It's definitely impossible to have somebody that's in shape and a heathen. But if you're going to a church and somebody's committed to church and they're also in shape, they're disciplined individuals. So you're going to have generally in shape masculine men, and then you're going to see beautiful, joyful women and there's probably going to be a lot of kids, and so that's been, and that will be the meta narrative of this particular church. So go find that church and find a man there and be like, I need help. I don't know. I didn't have a father. I mean, you and I have talked, I think, about Michael Foster's book and some of those things that there's, it's good to be a man, and there's some resources out there and stuff, but that's not going to replace being in person, in the flesh, with across the room, face to face with a guy that's 10, 15, 20 years in front of you. So make that 1 degree correction now. Submit to the way the universe is ordered by an almighty God. Get the cheat code manual, the FM for life, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That's the word of God. And then find some people that are 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in front, and say, what can I do? How can I get there? And then I was actually talking to a guy that said, a Christian guy, he's like, hey, if I agree to meet with you for lunch, be on time, dang it. Like, he's like, I've run multiple businesses, and he wasn't a mentor of mine, but he was talking to me about how when he's agreed to carve out some time from his schedule and meet with a younger guy, and the guy shows up 10 minutes late to lunch, and he's like, you're wasting my time. My time is valuable. And then I've also heard a podcast talking about is like, implement what the guy's saying. Because if I'm mentoring a guy and I'm like, bro, you just really need to do this, and every time we meet, we're talking about that same thing, it's much better to say, I have business coaches and stuff, and it's like, hey, I really think you need to adjust your landing page and this. Boom, boom, boom. Hey, check it out. Like, that day, I made these changes. What do you think? And so a older man that sees you respecting his time and implementing what he's telling you. And it doesn't mean that it goes perfectly. Like, even you're trying to implement it. I went home to my wife and I'm trying to figure this out, and she acted this way, and all that kind of stuff. Like, okay, yeah, of course, because this is the way that you have been with her for 10 years. And now you're excited, and she has to see the proof of this in your life over the course of time. And you can't just grab the steering wheel and make a hard right, and she's getting, banged against the outside of the bus as you're yanking the steering wheel. You got to lead slowly. You got to apply that pressure. You got to be praying about it, and you got to be doing the actions yourself repeatedly to expect it to be worked out in your family. And I would just back to that 1 degree correction, like 3 generations from now, you making that 1 degree correction and walking that path, your family and your legacy is going to be in a completely different continent than where you would have been if you had stayed on that course right where you're at. So plant a stake now. They say best time to plant a tree 20 years ago, second best time today. Like, let's do it. And then find somebody local, a local group of people that can do it. And come to Southern Pines, North Carolina, and come to evening church. And we have a fire pit afterwards. We have cigars, and there's 10, 15, 20 dudes sitting there smoking cigars. There's 150 kids, and shoot me a message. And that's kind of been the thing. I've had lots of people, hey, I really need, all right, this is where we'll be Sunday night, and like to see you there. And I like actually having people come to our church from the internet, and then realizing like, oh, wow, like, it's not Nathan. Like, this is incredible. Like, there's 15, 20 dudes here that I can respect and learn from. And in a sense, I'm attracting some of these guys, and then they're just getting plugged in, and there's other families that even they're more in line with, and there's just stuff happening. It's magical. And we're not meant to do this alone. The tactical family, if you will, is well networked and has other people and other families that are walking the path that can help you out. And you just gotta do it. And it's a lot of work. You don't feel like finding all the shoes for the kids, or even yourself. Like, I went out and I drank a little too much. I was doing whatever. I'm kind of tired. I don't want to get up. I'll just skip Sunday school. Don't do it. That's that 1 degree back the other way. I'm going to just skip church today because, blah, blah, blah. Like, these excuses that creep into your mind that you have to take care of it. You gotta fight against that spiritually, physically, emotionally, all the time, on every front, and stay on course. I don't know, verbose as all get out as usual. Sorry.
Well, Nathan, one of the things that I enjoy about you, and something that I'm very thankful for, is that you have. Have you read any of Ernest Shackleton? Okay, so
I mean, I know the stories, but I haven't read his book.
Yeah, there's something that he said is that optimism is a moral virtue, and this is there's so many things, whether we're talking about the election or the time frame that we're at, and I think for plenty of men, it can be described either in the simple form of a meme: born too late to discover the planet, born too early to discover the universe, or something like that. These kind of questions that arise: why do I have to live in the time of American decline, or whatever? So there's plenty of reasons for men to look outside the window or into their own lives and become pessimistic, but you seem to bring a genuine optimism with the teeth to bear it. So that is something that I appreciate about you. I just want to say something kind.
I think that it's obviously can vary from the day,
Fair.
but I also we're not getting anywhere sitting there. I mean, definitely, do I need to make a course correction? Like, I think it's a fair thing to do that. Like, in my off course, if I keep just put my head down and blitz in the wrong direction, I don't make it. I don't get where I want to go. If I stop for a second, but there's that kind of that balance between doing a map check and realizing where you are, but then the other reality of start walking, And so the guy that checks his map all the time is super accurate, but never gets anywhere, and the guy that it's almost better to know generally where you are, run that ridge line, and instead of dead wrecking, right through a mess. So I'm always doing a map check for sure. But then very quickly, I think that's my strength is just start walking and start doing it. And then if the feedback is, oh shoot, there's a lot of mountain laurel right here, is real thick, I probably should run back up on the ridge line and cut around and get in, and constantly evaluating that. And if you're doing that, you're going to get there eventually,
Yeah.
So
we don't have enough time to cover, because you've opened up 3 different avenues of approach that I wanted to have a conversation with you. So maybe we'll have to schedule another time. I know we're limited, but one of them was I have a section on my bookshelf, that is almost exclusively Christian books written to men. It really is. I mean, and then it ends with like Jack Donovan, so not Christian man, but and I've been reading these books for the better part of my life, and I'm familiar with what you're talking about when it comes to like the church, where why are men leaving the church, or why have men completely abandoned it or left it behind, and your shadow matriarchy and all. So someday we have to have a conversation about being a Christian man in a world with consequences. Now, and the reason why I phrase that is quite a bit of this podcast is centered around the gun culture. Like, that's just what it is, and that's where I come from now, and that's kind of where we're at. And for the longest time, I think I've finally been able to kind of put some words to it. Is that, like, why do people get invested in the gun culture, and what is it that they're calling towards, or what is it that they're aiming at? And I think there is this desire, as well as this yearning, desire, whatever, for a life of consequence, of where a world where your actions have consequences. And well, that's quite different than the church that we're speaking about, which is the shadow matriarchy, where everything is plastic and malleable.
Yeah. I guess one comment I would have, I was talking with somebody about this. The first guy I killed on the battlefield, forced me to develop this. And we were in extreme Western Iraq, and the curfew was, or there was a curfew in place, and this is 2005, and beheading people and IEDs starting to be just prolific. And so it was, if they're a military age male and you see them on the street, you kill them. Like, there's a curfew in place. You're not supposed to be moving around, and so we were moving down a street, and two dudes kind of were running across the street, and I shot both of them, or one of them, winged one of them, whatever, and he drops and ends up dying. Well, uh, nobody else really got into any firefight. I'm the only guy. I shoot two dudes. One guy's dead for sure. One guy's wounded. And platoon sergeant runs up to me. Why'd you shoot him? It's like, well, I'm spec 4. You said curfew. If they're moving on the perimeter, shoot them. I did. Like, well, my platoon proceeded to heckle me for the that period of darkness into the next day, kind of thing. Like, oh, Nate, he was probably running to get some food for his family, because, or bucket of water, because we did some call for fire on this V-bid, and it blew up and went into the courtyard of the house, and that was probably some innocent person running to get a bucket of water to put the fire out for his family. Or, like, they just were wrecking me about this. And I was not um I was not upset because they were heckling me, because I was just used to that. But I was literally kind of in agony, because I was like, just because I was allowed by the 2005 ROE to kill a military aged male after dark, should I have? You know, like, just because it was legal, did that make it right for me as a Christian man to kill somebody? To essentially, in that part of the world, arrange a meeting with the maker they're not ready with, and so I had to sit with that till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the PM in that day. We were overnight. Squad leaders go to the intelligence brief for the day after we wake up. We're on reverse schedule, and he comes back to the hooch, and it's like, hey, we got a you know uh, intel back that they're mourning the loss of two of the fighters. You know, uh, so I guess the other guy that I hit ends up dying too, or whatever. But so they're like, all right, it wasn't a innocent man that was going to help his family. Like, they're literally talking about it on the radios and stuff, about how two were martyred and whatever. So I got, like, God gave me this period of time to sit with my if, as you said, like, in an environment where there are consequences. I had to sit with the consequence of my action as a Christian at war. But then God was gracious enough to give me kind of closure on that particular thing. But I left that particular situation thinking, I will never take life again based on ROE. And I guess from there on out, there's two sides to this coin. One, I don't kill because some JAG lawyer told me I could. And then I also don't not kill because some JAG lawyer said I can't. Because the reality of these actions are, the JAG guy said I couldn't kill this person, but my buddy's dead and his 4 kids have no dad now, because I was afraid to drop the hammer because of an attorney that isn't even here. And so I guess that will be the say is like, I'm sorry, but damn the consequences in this life compared to giving an account before the maker. And I think that gives me the, and it's, there's so many like times that I had to learn this in so many different ways in my life, but it's not about what anybody around you says is right. If right is right. I read a tweet just earlier this morning: a lie repeated 1,000 times is still a lie. And so we're in that culture where people are licking their finger and trying to figure out which way the wind blows before they decide what to do. And that's not leadership. Leadership, and anybody that isn't licking their finger and is just saying what they think is right, is doing well. I think there's a lot of people saying things that are stupid, and in some ways they're saying, like, the wind is blowing this way. Let me see if I can say something that cuts that and is, viral. And so they're literally fools that are they think they're being the truth people but they're literally making their decisions based on the same way that somebody who is trying to not ruffle feathers. Like, both are the same way of making decisions and taking action. The world craves men, particularly right now, that do the work to and I don't know if I can get it pulled up in time here, but the prescriptive of I think it's Westminster Longer Catechism 137. I'll be one or two off, but let me get it real quick, because I think it's probably a good thing to close on. 30.
It's I remember first time
the duties
discovering.
required in the sixth commandment, and if you look at it, if you go into it, it's we're supposed to patiently bearing the hand of God, quietness of mind, cheerfulness of spirit, sober use of meat, drink, physical, sleep, labor, recreations, by charitable thoughts, love, compassion, meekness, gentleness, kindness, peaceable, mild, courteous in speech, behavior, forbearance, readiness to be reconciled. We have all these lists of character traits. And then, there's 25 scripture verses subnoted in there that you could literally, if you just take this gun culture people, right? The sixth commandment being thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill. Again, it's those conversations that we have as men who have taken life. So thou shalt not kill, but the actual prescriptive that comes from that, and what you're supposed to do, I'd say as a man who's like, I'm gonna get these guns, I'm gonna train, I'm gonna learn how to be shoot fast. Okay, let's just use Westminster Longer Catechism 135. I would have the answer wrong. It's 135 on what you supposed to cultivate that in your life at the same time. And that's why being in a local church and being under real men that cultivate these things in your life, when you do this and when you cultivate that in every area of your life, even in traffic, when somebody cuts you off, that freaking, like, okay, that's are you cultivating that gentleness and kindness and the peaceable and mild and courteous speech and behavior in traffic? Are you cultivating it with your children, with your wife, with other people because if you're not, when the time comes for you to be truly meek, so I got to flip the switch now, and I got to go as C.S. Lewis in The Last Battle, courteous words or else hard knocks. So it's time to is it time to flip the switch from courteous words to hard knocks? I can't be confident in my own ability to do that if I haven't committed my life to cultivating all these other things that make me confident that if it's time to pull the trigger, to drop the hammer, that I am doing it for good and not doing it because I'm an idiot or because I'm wanting violence. And so, I don't know, like, that's probably a good spot to end on, and a good prescriptive for people. And then you can decide whether or not you want to bring me back or whatever. But that's what I go to for me, for somebody who has spent, almost 14 years cultivating violence and then continuing to a capacity for violence. And going back to that, am I cultivating all these other things in my life that make me confident that I can make the right decision in a moment of duress and where I'm tired, or when it's coming upon me when I'm least expecting it? Am I ready to make that decision? Well, if I'm doing that as eat, sleep, and drink, I'm cultivating that all the time, I'm not worried. I'm acting. I'm going after it, and then God's I'm going to answer to God for that.
That is the right place to end, though, and that I think is it's I think it's a call to greatness amongst an era that is obsessed with mediocrity. Nathan, one of the things that you've encouraged me with, and one of the things that I've taken away, is I think that our era, the life that we're living in 2024, year of our Lord, is, I think, one of the profound lessons of our generation is that meekness and weakness are not the same thing.
Correct.
And we know that characters like Jordan Peterson have had some conversations on it, even though he's not coming from a Christian faith. There are other characters who have presented it, but I think if we were going to go even into something more comical, like The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe, it's again this, like, the time passes, lessons have to be relearned. There is no generation that is the golden age, so to speak, of man, and so I think that is that is an encouraging place to end. That was the Westminster Catechism you're talking about was 135, just so anyone who remembers. Good. Nathan, where do people find you? How does the audience follow up with you? What are you working on now, and how does that work for you?
I for the longest time was doing a lot on Instagram, and about only that on Instagram, and long form podcast as well. My podcast is Life on Target, and I think we're at 82 episodes there. Had about a year hiatus, and then now I have a 15-year-old son that can edit and publish for me. So I've got about 5 or 6 recorded, and we're getting into a pretty good rhythm of publishing again. So if you go to any of the podcast places, search Life on Target, but then also spearing.co is the website where I have kind of my digital download stuff, my blogs, my long form podcast stuff. Just recently, as we kind of mentioned the election, and I've had people telling me like, "Hey, Tactical Household is like the best summary of what you're trying to do right now." And kind of for the longest time, like, yeah, I'm doing this blue collar business, I'm building this homestead or whatever, but I've kind of recently put some energy into what the tactical household looks like. And so if people go to tacticalhousehold.com, that's forwards to Gumroad, but I have a private Telegram group there. I'm putting out resources, and I'll give you the links and stuff for the show notes. But that's kind of, I guess, I'm putting stuff out on Instagram and X, but I haven't felt like I could say, even with the stuff that's being said on these platforms, all right, here's the kind of what our family is doing on our farm to make our family more tactical, and tactical being you're making decisions based on something beyond the immediate uh, results. And so I think that when you look at the definition of tactics and tactical, that describes how I'm kind of trying to live my family, like moving into a bus, and it doesn't make sense uh, today, but tactically it enabled us to get 54 acres before land continued to even skyrocket even more. And now we have the homestead carved out, and we're able to, it's delaying things, it's making decisions. So, I'm talking about the gear that I'm buying and cultivating to create kind of our family to be dangerous, but also to have resources like, controlling the food that we eat and making us anti-fragile. But if you go to spearing.co, everything's there. The podcast, the social channels. I started X in January pretty hardcore, and got 4 or 5 times the following in a few months that I did after 4 or 5 years on Instagram. So I put a little more into X, and then I do the other platforms, but all those links are on spearing.co. And if you want to, I've got probably 5 or 6 families that have uprooted and moved to our church. So if you want to go that hardcore and join us, even just visit for a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, we'd love to have more families. You got a bunch of kids, you're looking around saying, I don't think there's a church. Come on, we'll take you in Southern Pines. So
Well, there it is. There it is. Let's get everybody, everyone, let's not say all of my friends, but I definitely have a group, a number of people who all live in different states, and they're all like, "Hey, we should have everybody move here," and no one can agree on which state we're going to move to, so we all live in our own individual states. But I'm going to have to make my way out to Southern Pines here pretty soon. Then it looks like that's going to have to be on the books
for sure.
But Nathan, thank you for taking some time out of your day to record this episode. You are somebody that I do genuinely look up to, and I look up and I say, that guy's doing it. Maybe I can learn something from you. And I hope that the audience gained something from this as well. I think more than likely they have. But in all, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing not only elements of your individual story, but lessons that came along the way and things that you've learned that have contributed to a life well lived.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So then, in closing, those who are listening, this is the Redacted Culture Cast, and while it does tend to be a podcast focused on gun culture specific environs, we have today someone who would be representative as at least at one point in time a pinnacle of that achievement. And yet, I think there's more to be learned from you, Nathan, that is not exactly gun culture related, but maybe a little bit more of a bigger picture. And so, thank you for coming on. For those who are interested in supporting our show, if you want to give us if you want to check out what we're doing, you can find us at redactedllc.com. That's going to be not only our events pages, but our shop as well. The shop directly supports this environment. And as I build a little bit more, we can start adding to the studio and making the place a little bit better. The goal would be to have all in-person interviews, but we need to get a bit bigger for there. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below because that at least allows me to continue growing. And as we gain momentum, so we can expand the operation. Nathan, thank you for your time. Thank you for your advice. Now, as we close, go forth and conquer.
Amen.